Few, of course, it's a strike that could collapse service delivery and impact the economy. That's because of the public servants on the streets for a second time in 2 weeks. What does business say?
It is indeed a huge concern, Masako, and there are various organizations that have slammed public sector unions, saying that they're acting irresponsibly. Now, unions have vowed to not back down until government agrees to a 10% pay increase. Now, they have embarked on a protest action today, disrupting services including the already ailing healthcare system. Let's unpack how the parties can arrive at some kind of solution that will satisfy workers but also protect the already fragile fiscus. Cas Coovadia, CEO of Business Unity South Africa, joins us for that discussion, and also taking a look at the implications should government concede on those demands. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, Cas. Let's start with that very point around what solution could there be so that we can satisfy what the unions are calling for and also make sure that the fiscus is not more compromised than it already is.
Well, I'm not too sure there is a solution that can satisfy both. The bottom line is that a medium-term budget framework was presented a couple of weeks ago that talked to a certain percentage increase for public sector wages. And anything above that means that you're actually getting into more of a fiscal crunch. If wage increases are settled above the 3% I think was in the MTBPS, then that money has got to come from somewhere, and either other departmental budgets would have to be trimmed, or we'd have to borrow money. And to borrow money for operating costs like these and increase our interest burden, which is already, I think, the second biggest budget expenditure item, is not sustainable. So I don't think you can satisfy both. I think that a budget has got to be followed up by actions that are informed by that budget. And if government signs off on a budget that says increases will be limited to 3%, and then settles well above the 3%, and then government needs to realize that you are actually worsening the fiscal crisis we are in.
Yeah, and I mean, it's important, Cas, to understand that I'm sure unions or different stakeholders related to the unions are usually part of the broader discussions when it comes to putting together the national budget for the financial year. So one would think that unions have an understanding of the economic pressures that government, and particularly National Treasury, is facing when it comes to allocation of these budgets throughout the financial year.
Yeah, look, I mean, one would assume so. I think that, you don't even need to be part of the run-up to the budget and part of processes of consultation and so on. We know, we see every day what the impact of lack of investment, sufficient investment, and what the impact of not having reasonable levels of growth is. I mean, and that's exacerbated by issues related to energy, issues related to law and order and crime and so on. And all of that adds to the problem we have, that we don't have an environment where we can actually encourage investors to come and invest, and they feel safe to come and invest in this country. So we know that. Unions know that. Now, I can understand that unions have a constituency. Their constituency are employed workers, and they have to respond to their constituency and try to negotiate as good a deal as they can. But I think that one needs to look at this within the practical constraints of resources and budgets and so on. And I think that the union movement also needs to appreciate that when Treasury puts figures on the table, so post the MTBPS, the minister and his team came to NEDLAC and talked us through the figures. And we all understood why those figures. We all understood the crunch that we are in. So I think there needs to be some sort of tempering of the demands by unions on behalf of their members. And we need to actually see how we manage our economy and growth, economic growth that we need to get in a way that we actually create employment for as many people as possible. And while protecting those that are employed is one part of this equation, I think the more important part of this equation is to get as many unemployed people employed as possible.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to concentrate on.
A final thought from you, Cas. Are there any concerns from yourself or your members that the strike action could spill into the private sector in terms of services being provided or not being provided because of the strike action?
Well, there will be obviously an impact. I mean, if services are impacted negatively, business will be impacted. If refuse removal isn't picked up, if other municipal services like cleaning and others aren't done, there will be an impact, and we just need to manage that. I'm sure businesses will put contingency measures into place, but it just sends out a message that makes it more and more difficult for us to instill confidence amongst investors to actually come and invest here.
Thank you very much for your time. Cas Coovadia, he's the CEO of Business Unity South Africa there. Just broadly speaking around the implications of the strike action.